Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is not maybe too nice to introduce an event by criticizing its title, Against All Odds. I feel that I can introduce a note of optimism that I would define with the following words. The real world is going faster than negotiation. A decarbonized economy was perceived only a few years ago as the end of growth. Some people even talked about the necessity of happy degrowth. But it introduced the notion that if we wanted to save the planet, our region, we needed to give up something. Our comforts, our income, our jobs. Thanks God, this wrong idea is now overcome. And it is time for action, action that we are witnessing also in the context of this event. Let me just introduce a couple reasonings. There is a classical narrative about the environment that sees the general public committed to saving its future against very wicked and colluded economic world and governments. Well, if you want to tell the truth, it's exactly the contrary. At this time, governments were not always very effective, but they were the ones that started the game. And then the other public enemy number one of those who wanted to save the world followed suit for some reason. If we want to see what's happening in the real world, we have to check what those guys who seem not to be committed with the common good, at least this is the usual perception, are doing. And there is among them one group which has always been considered the wicked of the wicked, and I'm talking about finance. Well, if finance goes a certain direction, we might think that the world goes a certain direction. Let us hear what finance is doing. Well, we're witnessing the greatest portfolio shift in history. At the beginning of this century, in the portfolios of great investors, ESG investments accounted for less than 1%. Today, after only 20 years, we are at more than 26%, and the declared intention is to make this proportion grow up to 60% within 5 years. Now, why are they doing that? I think that they also have children and they want their future to be protected. But besides that, they have discovered one thing, that sustainable doesn't mean killing your competitivity. Sustainable is convenient. It gives wings to companies. It gives wings to economy. There are two reasonings about this. One is macroeconomic and the other one is microeconomic. Macroeconomy, it was in 2008, right before the subprime crisis, that the American Treasury published a report called The Bottleneck, basically warning that there would be no more economic growth. Why? Because economy had structured itself in a way that very few people were producing and benefiting from a huge income. More and more people were becoming poor and the middle class was shrinking, but the market is made by middle class. Right afterwards, the subprime crisis arrived. It was interpreted as a banking instruments problem, but it was a symptom of what the American Treasury had announced. And there were some responses. The first response came from the US by President Obama, who decided to adopt a so-called Keynesian policy with the stimulus package. A lot of public money injected in the economy. Few remember that Obama's first proposal was not a general stimulus package, but it had to be a green stimulus package. All this money needed to be injected in the economy to green it. Why? Because Obama cared about the environment, probably, but Obama's first priority was occupation, and economy to start again, to grow. So why bet on green to relaunch the economy? It's against our instincts. Well, simply because green economy redistributes income. While it protects the environment, it is also a just economy. Let me give you a very short example. Imagine I am a company owner and I make prefabs. If I just have to make a prefab, I can have purveyors bring the materials at the beginning of the line, that the line can be handled by machines or by human beings reduced to the role of machines, and at the end I would have a prefab. But if I want to have a green prefab, this is not possible, because green means that you have to interpret your territory. A prefab is green or not according to where it rains, how much wind there is, and this kind of things. So a green economy is an economy that interprets the territory, and it means that you have to inject human knowledge, academic knowledge, but also the knowledge of the few old people who still know how to build dry walls on the mountains. So the idea is, if you go green, actually you will kickstart a new cycle of growth. On the microeconomic side, what companies are realizing is that it is true that if you incorporate concerns about protecting society and nature around you, your production costs go up. And so you might feel that you're becoming less competitive. But I've also noticed that these expenses are more than compensated by other advantages. Mainly that you protect your supply chain, that you build public favor around your company, and this is very important. And third, that industrial relations, that is the relationship between the ownership and all those who work in the company, suddenly become magically more effective. In a company that makes their people feel that they belong to a mission, and not only that they produce income for someone out there, you don't have strikes, and you also have something that otherwise you would have to pay very, very expensive, which is creativity. A company where you just get a salary and you want to get out as soon as possible every day needs to inject creativity by paying very expensive consultants. In a company where you all feel part of a mission, which is not only to make money, but is to be positive to society and the environment around you, this seems to be not necessary. So, sorry for starting to say, no, it's not against the odds. It's actually the right moment. And we are all behind you. This is the way we have to go, because this is the truth. If you watch negotiation, maybe we think that we don't have much chances. But if you watch what's happening in the real world, and the real world is you, the real world is people who are creating new jobs, new ways to build relationships, maybe we can make it. Thank you so much.
Well, okay, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, well, it's really a pleasure and an honor to be with you this afternoon here in Sharm el Sheikh, at this very special occasion of the COP27, which is one of the greatest exercises of climate diplomacy, because we are an emergency which needs voice to be heard all around the world, and as I will stress the point, especially here in the Mediterranean. And it's a pleasure to be with you. My name is Alain Florensa. I'm Executive President of European Institute of the Mediterranean, and I am the President of the Executive Committee of Euromesco as well, because one of the things we're doing today is to present the results of one of the studies of the Euromesco. Euromesco, as you may know, is the network of 115 institutes and think tanks from all the European Union countries and South and East Mediterranean countries. We work together, financed by the European Commission, to produce studies, reflections, to guide policy, because it's an exercise of dialogue, advocacy, and research, always policy-oriented, and that's what we need, especially in this respect of the climate. And I was saying that we are in a state of emergency because we know that the pledges that were made in the Paris Agreement are not always reached and fulfilled, sometimes quite on the contrary. And we know that to avert the catastrophes in the future, we have to take really action and we have to take seriously. And but we have the advantage of knowing that all the immense challenges that we have to overcome offer at the same time great opportunities for development and creating jobs and a more progressive and inclusive economy. And therefore, it is really the great opportunity of facing these challenges. In the Mediterranean area, this is especially so, because you know that the Mediterranean is a fragile region, and it's hit much harder than other areas in the world by the climate change. We have floods, we have droughts, we have desertification processes, we have fires. In the previous session, we have heard of some examples of these and the measures that can be taken in Mediterranean areas, be it in Greece or in Spain or even elsewhere, in some other Mediterranean climate areas who are suffering similar phenomenon as even in California or in Australia, where they are facing these droughts and floods and fires all together, which seems an incredible mixture of that. So this endangers people and their livelihoods and the environment, and it's the same time the cause of growing instability, so that in the Mediterranean we are in these new emergencies, because we have gone from a period, I would say, of optimism in the classical period of Barcelona process in the mid-90s, when we thought that well, we could overcome all difficulties, even conflicts, protracted conflicts in the Middle East, etc. In fact, situation in the whole Middle East has gone even much worse than it was then. And we have these new challenges that have been made more visible in recent years. So we have had the financial and economic crisis after 2008. In 2020, we have had the effects of the pandemic, because we had to stop the world, and this has, for a period, occasionated the more serious economic crisis in many decades. And now, when we were recovering from that moment and thinking that we could put more resources in the new emergencies that we have related to climate and other things in the agenda, we have had the war in Ukraine, which is putting not only geopolitically much more strain and pressure in international relations, but it is causing food insecurity, it is causing energy crisis, inflation, and its overall social and economic effects. So we have to face this cumulative crisis. They have really an accumulation of crises. We have to face climate, energy, food, geopolitical crisis. So we need some simultaneous transformations. We know that we have to go through a multifaceted transition. We need a green transition, and we need a digital transition, because it is only through the modernization of all aspects of the economic life that we can tackle at the same time these other challenges. So it's a combined. We know that there are enormous synergies in the policies we need to overcome these challenges and to go through this very complicated period on these green transitions and to overcome the overall cumulative crisis. At the level of the European Union, we are following this vision of the Green Deal internally for the policies proposed by the European Union in the European countries, but there is un volet extérieur, there is an external side to this Green Deal in Europe, which is through the renewed partnership with Southern Neighborhood, the new agenda for the Mediterranean, in which these new items on the Euro-Mediterranean agenda are much more clear than in previous periods of the Euro-Mediterranean policies. So in the Green Deal, the fact is the will to turn Europe into a carbon neutral continent by 2050. And the external action, we know that we need to have a much more ambitious cooperation between the European Union and South and East Mediterranean partner countries, because in fact Mediterranean area is a unique and one single system in which we all are. So we have to tackle the issue not only from one side, because that wouldn't help. We have to do it through international cooperation. Fortunately, in the Euro-Mediterranean area, we have some of the instruments that are needed, as the Union for the Mediterranean, for example, to provide guidance for governments, for institutions, at the European level, at the national level in European countries, in the North-South cooperation with our Mediterranean partners, to provide for the new policies that we need to tackle this extremely complicated period that we have to go through. And I hope that this occasion of this major exercise of climate diplomacy of the COP27 is a great occasion for that. So I hope that this session will provide some light and some interesting ideas to that effect. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. First of all, allow me to praise the work that the UFM Secretariat has been doing alongside a number of other regional institutions and organizations. They have put up a very impressive program. We know that it has been a hell of very tough work, and I would like to personalize that on the person of Ambassador Gramenos. So thank you. I feel proud of the UFM as an intergovernmental organization based in Barcelona that has managed to mobilize such resources and strength in the COP27. Being the Decarbonization Day, as our president was saying, IMET and Euromesco want to bring to the debate both reflection on the current state of play, of how things are going, how we are transiting towards greener economies in the region, but also of solutions of public policy. Being aware, of course, that the EU has put forward an ambitious Mediterranean agenda a year and a half ago that has been followed with the signing of the partnership priorities with Jordan first, later on with Egypt, also has been followed with the signing of a green partnership with Morocco that was signed a month ago, but also being aware that a number of challenges, both endogenous and exogenous shocks, are rapidly increasing, and therefore the time is diminishing, is decreasing, and action and implementation, as the motto of this COP27, is of utmost importance. We have to be ambitious, but also operational and responsive to both short and long-term objectives and goals. And as it was said, the European Green Deal can be instrumental to this end, but the internal and the external EU policy decisions must be fine-tuned with climate ambitions. in order to discuss about all these challenges that we have ahead, in order to map the challenges, the barriers standing on the way of the Euro-Mediterranean transition towards greener economies, but also to point to possible solutions, we have two outstanding speakers today representing a variety of sectors, civil society, academia, and also subnational or local authorities. I would say very complementary. So online, we have Dr. Laura Bassagni, who is director of the Brussels office of the European House Ambrosetti, which bridges the public and business communities to co-create transition pathways to tackle from digitalization to climate change. And then here on site, we have Josep Canals, who is the Secretary General of MedCities, the largest network of Mediterranean cities. And Canals himself being an ecologist, if I'm not mistaken, with an extensive experience on urban planning. He's been working in also in Europe, but also in Latin America. So I'm going to organize this debate into rounds of questions. I'll start by asking the panelists to map the challenges, the bottlenecks, the shortcomings standing on the way of the Euro-Mediterranean transition towards greener economies, and specifically to Laura, who should be online. I'm going to ask her about the effects on the Ukrainian war, on the joint commitments that were undertaken and that are hindering this pathway towards advancing and greening our economies. So, Laura, it's a bit difficult because she should be she should be online. There she is. Thank you very much, Laura. We're very sorry not to have you with us today, but happy that you could finally make it at least online. So the floor is yours, Laura.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And let me start by thanking the Mediterranean Pavilion and the IEMED for giving me the opportunity to speak today. Lots has already been said about how important the green transition is in the new agenda for the Mediterranean that was adopted by the European Union last year, and was actually the core of our study that we conducted with Euromesco and was published at the beginning of this year, actually right before or right after the beginning of the war in Ukraine, which leads me to your question about the impact of the war on plans for the green transition in the Mediterranean region. Obviously, it's early to say what will be the actual impact in the long term, but we can already make some important considerations right now. So first of all, the European Union has adopted in March of 2022 the Repower EU plan. The goal of the plan is to achieve complete independence from Russian fossil fuel for Europe by 2027. And it includes short-term, medium-term, and long-term measures. The medium and long-term measures have reaffirmed the importance of the green transition, so both increasing energy efficiency and also the development and deployment of green energy sources. At the same time, the first reactions that we've seen from Europe have been a scramble for securing energy sources in the short term, which means moving towards new commercial deals and also infrastructural plans to secure gas for the next winters. And this is true for European countries in general, but obviously for the sake of this conversation, I will focus on the Mediterranean countries or the deals that have interest the Mediterranean region intended in a wider sense. So we've seen in 2022 new deals between Italy and Algeria and Italy and Egypt, and actually further down in Africa, other deals with, between Italy and Angola and Congo to import more gas. Actually, the plan is to, through these deals, to lower the Italian dependency on Russian gas by 40% to 10%. Also in 2022, Spain renegotiated its deal with Algeria for the import of gas, renegotiated at a higher price than it was supposed to initially, and the imports make up for 43% of Spanish imports of gas. And we've also seen plans to either upgrade or create new infrastructure projects for the regasification of liquefied natural gas. Now, obviously, it's normal that in the short term, we need to secure energy sources, and we are still in a state where we are dependent on fossil fuel. So this was to be expected. At the same time, this is sending mixed signals to the markets and to partner countries of Europe. And we've seen the impact already through the summer. For example, we've seen emerging plans to increase even more gas supply towards the European market. We've seen announcements from Nigeria and Niger to export gas towards Europe, and through the construction of new infrastructure again. So a pipeline that would be called the Trans-Saharan pipeline to connect to the Trans-Mediterranean pipeline that is actually transporting gas already from Algeria through Tunisia to Sicily. And on the other side, also another pipeline to connect Nigeria to Morocco and then to Spain, and then potentially to France, if also a new pipeline is built as well to connect those two countries. So we're seeing an impetus to invest more money into fossil fuel, and it has been repeated multiple times during this conference already and through the presentation of reports that this goes against our climate commitments. Even last year, the International Energy Agency has reaffirmed the fact that not only more investment in fossil fuel will not allow us to reach our climate targets, but that we actually do not need to invest in more fossil fuel infrastructure if we are to follow the transition pathways that we have set up for ourselves. So there are also more positive, let's say, initiatives that have emerged from this crisis, even in the Mediterranean. One has been already mentioned, the Mediterranean Green Hydrogen Partnerships that the European Commission has signed with Egypt for the production of hydrogen and trade between Europe, Africa, and the Gulf. And also under the bigger framework of the Global Gateway Strategy, the European Commission has pledged to invest 1.8 billion euros in Morocco for the development of green energy. So there are signs in the, let's say, right direction, and that contribute to the plans for a concerted green transition in the Euro-Mediterranean region. But right now, what's really important is that governments on both sides of the Mediterranean send a clear signal to the market and to all players that we are still on path to the phasing out of fossil fuel, including gas.
Well, thank you, Laura. So from your first answers, we can conclude that all what is happening after the Russian invasion on Ukraine is bad news or most of what is happening is bad news, because indeed with all these new infrastructures, mainly on natural gas that are being developed, we are running away from the commitments and the goals that we had all acquired a few years ago, unless we transform these new, let's say, pipelines into transitional pipelines that can later on combine and bring to Europe green hydrogen. Let's move now to a very different scope, and I will hand over the floor to Secretary General Canals, so that he can present all these shortages and shortcomings and bottlenecks and challenges, but from the local level perspective. Especially you, your organization is directly advising the municipality of Tunis, which is one of the most important cities in the region. So please.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. As we say in Catalan, bon dia. Thank you for being here, for being here to listen to us. I would like to congratulate and thank the Union for the Mediterranean for this extraordinary first Mediterranean pavilion. That it's nice that we saw some, we knew it, but we saw that some Australian before told us that of course the Mediterranean biome is it's beyond beyond the Mediterranean region. So we have things in common that can also help us to understand and to work together in the global south and north, because we have Mediterranean biome in the north and in the south. And thank you for the European Institute of the Mediterranean. Thank you very much for having us here. Well, I first heard about climate change in '96 in a classroom where I studied biology degree. A lot has happened since then. I think in '92, even in '92 was the summit of Rio. A lot of what has happening. We've been gathering more and more evidence, but we know that we need to act. I think, if I'm not wrong, that next year will be 20 years from the Stern report. If I'm saying correctly, citing correctly, he said that 2006. I was hesitating about 3 or 6. Okay. But anyway, a lot of years after that, he was saying, if I'm correct, that the cost of not acting is much worse than the cost of acting in a long perspective. So for regarding acting and implementation, here we are, the local authorities. MedCity is an association of almost, by the end of this month, 70 local authorities from the whole region. And we are very content that in many aspects, local authorities, as you know, has been sometimes or have felt ignored by other levels of administration. Our presence here proves that something is changing, not because of this, but in many times. We've been increasing our cooperation with the Union of the Mediterranean, for example, in some thematical projects, urban transports, water, and with the Institute of the Mediterranean, Europeo del Mediterraneo, which is formed by several levels. So it's important, this communication. But we still feel some constraints, some restrictions. I would like to put an example, because I did it publicly there. We are part of the Barcelona Convention and its protocol system, the Barcelona Convention for the Protection of the Mediterranean Sea and the coastal ecosystems. Many of great and very good decisions were taken on the COP last year, for example, in Antalya. We were there. But many of these decisions regarding, for example, the waste management or the waste water treatment or how to prevent marine litter were decided there. And most of these actions need to be done, and mostly are done in cities and villages, and can be solved mainly by local authorities, by boosting local authorities with civil society, with enterprises, with little stores, with little companies. But local authorities were not mentioned on any of the documents. And we highlighted that. We are here, there, we were invited, we are part of the system, part of the Mediterranean Commission of Sustainable Development, but local authorities are not mentioned when states decide very important decisions that I have to celebrate. For example, declare the Mediterranean region as a zone of free sulfur dioxide. So the main message for me is that we are part of the solution. I strongly believe that without local authorities, we will not succeed in the fight against climate change. But we need to be heard, firstly, but we need, many times said, we need more resources, more competencies, because we are not, as sometimes we have been said, and I say it as a former mayor, sometimes we have been observed as the main municipalities, have some kind of counterpower to states, but not. We are here to say we are complementary, as you said. We are here to cooperate, to work together with states, as this panel shows. we are here to say, please listen to us, because we are acting, we have been acting regarding the Sustainable Development Goals much before they were defined and established. The mayors are working on education and in gender perspective, in urban mobility, in sustainable mobility, in biodiversity. So we are doing a lot of projects that we will explain maybe in the second round, but we need to be at the table. We need to be heard. We need to cooperate because we have part of the solutions. I know not all the mayors are equally aware. I know not all of my members are equally aware. That's why also networks like us, like ours, has some kind of raison d'être, because some mayors can raise awareness on other mayors, and together we learn faster, we act faster. I will stay here for this moment.
Well, thank you, Josep. Well, in fact, if I'm not mistaken, the Barcelona Convention is from 1976, exactly, 1976. Back then, I was not born. So you were saying, well, already in the Barcelona Convention, there are several areas whose implementation rely on local authorities. And even today, so 46 years afterwards, local authorities are not recognized as I'm not saying the main, but as one of the main stakeholders that have a responsibility in promoting especially the mitigation and the adaptation measures to combat climate change. Okay, we'll go back to possible solutions. We move again to Laura, and then to Laura, we now in the second round, we are going to deal with how to overcome these challenges, and we are going to focus on solutions. So Laura, based on the study, by the way, you can find the study outside of the room, so you will find it there in case you want to take a copy with you. But based on the study, Laura, how can we anticipate and mitigate the effects of climate change as to advance towards greener economies in the Mediterranean region? So give us some solutions,
Yes.
some concrete solutions of public policy, please.
Some positive notes, yes. And I also want to say, like, the situation doesn't need to be negative for the region. I think we are just at a very crucial point, and decisions that we will make now will have a big impact on the future. So it might be positive that there is capital flowing to the region, because obviously, like, the northern Mediterranean countries need southern partners to diversify their energy supply, and at the same time, southern Mediterranean countries can benefit from the increased capital flowing to the region in order to invest them to diversify their economy away from fossil fuel. So the situation can actually be turned into favor of the green transition in the region. In any case, the policy solutions that we identified through the study are not particularly changed by the current situation. Like, the first point that I would like to make is that climate finance is absolutely crucial. We know that the reason why southern Mediterranean countries have not progressed as much towards the green transition is because there is a lack of investment. All countries have goals, have a national determined contributions. Some are more ambitious, some are less ambitious, but all of them agree that this is not possible without external sources of finance, obviously on top of what those countries will invest themselves. And again, this is like a very common theme that is running through this COP, especially where the issue of international climate finance is rightly so at the forefront, both for mitigation and adaptation, and finally also for loss and damage. So this is great. On the side of, like, recipient of international climate finance, there is definitely need for some reforms, legal reforms, regulatory reforms, technical reforms, to make sure that those investment can actually leverage private investment that will be needed. Private investments in infrastructure have very specific characteristics. They're not just they're not just about energy, or like all infrastructural projects have very key characteristic that needs an environment that is conducive to those investments. So legal and regulatory reforms that can lead to more transparency, to more predictability, to simplified processes to invest and to deploy those investments are definitely needed in the region. The third point that I would like to make is that cooperation between the two shores and climate diplomacy and climate cooperation based on the neighborhood policy will also be absolutely crucial, especially because we know a lot about where we're going, but there are a lot of question marks that are still open when it comes to the transition. And I think in particular, the choices that will be made in the European Union, but also in partner countries about the final weight of electrification and green fuels, especially hydrogen, into the final energy mix will make a lot of difference when it comes to the type of investments that will be made and the type of infrastructure that will be built. So it's important to make sure that there is a continuous dialogue and there are continuous channels for cooperation, for exchange of information, both at the bilateral level and at the regional level. And finally, again, linked to also the issue of climate finance, I think the point on equity was very strong in our study, and it's important to be made again. There are obviously, like, climate finance is at the core of the equity discussion, but there are also other aspects, like, for example, some policies that are under discussion inside the European Union. I think about, for example, the carbon border adjustment mechanism that will have an impact on Mediterranean partners. At the moment, it will be mainly on countries like Morocco and Egypt and Algeria because of the fertilizer and cement sectors that are covered by CBAM, but also in the future, hydrogen will probably fall under this piece of legislation. And these type of measures are absolutely crucial to deploy, to make sure that the transition can happen internally, because they are necessary to grant support internally inside the European Union. But it's important to also consider the external impact of these measures, especially on partner countries. So again, like a continuous dialogue and a continuous exchange that is based on the principle of equity will absolutely be crucial to deliver the transition in the region. And I covered a lot of points very quickly, but I want to make sure that there is time for questions and for other people's points.
Thank you, Laura. I like this combination of green and climate finance plus reforms plus regional cooperation. So that's perhaps to summarize the formula that you gave us. Let's now move. Perhaps I will go back to because you also introduced a very interesting point on the carbon border adjustment mechanism. So perhaps I will go back to that if we have time for questions later on. Let's now move to Giuseppe for his final comments or the second round of comments. So how do Mediterranean cities cope with that situation? Give us some concrete examples on possible solutions on how cities contribute to greening the economy, to decarbonizing the economy at the same time.
Well, if I may, I would speak of how to decarbonize the human actions, not only economy, but of course is related to economy. Firstly, I would like to say that what we are witnessing today, for me, had to happen 15 years ago, in my opinion. So we are, in my opinion, we are running late. And MEDEC experts have told us about we are closing the point of no return. So we need to act faster. And I say again, networks help a lot to act faster. You would be, maybe you know, some of you would be amazed on how different mayors from different countries and different regions are much alike. They are very similar one to another. They have the same preoccupations, the same anxieties, the same expectancies, and how they learn a lot from each other when we have the platforms to do that. MedCities is one of them. They learn a lot, and we can learn a lot by others' mistakes. For example, we can learn a lot. We can learn a lot by others' mistakes, but actions that others have achieved or has implemented before. On this regard, we have some examples. First, for us, the main action is to plan, to know where you want to go. As you mentioned, we are conducting the strategic planning of Tunis, the capital of Tunisia, for 4 years, with intervention, with engaging of the population for the first time, not for the first time, for the first stages, not at the end to ask them, what do you think about it, that we have done? No. Let's do it together. Let's create together. What's the kind of city that do you want? What's the kind of changes that we must act? We need to change behaviors. I am really convinced that we need to change some behaviors. We cannot act as the same. So by planning, but at the same time by acting. We are, for example, during the developing of the strategic planning of Tunis, which is a European project linked to the SDGs, we are developing the waste management of the metropolitan area of Tunis that didn't exist. It's incredible. As I said, we are late. Tunis must have had his waste management plan maybe 20 years ago, but they don't have it. But we are doing it. And with the metropolitan perspective, in a region that doesn't have a metropolitan area institutionalized. So this project is trying to work together and is preparing investments, for example, to waste treatment, to compost treatment, so the very practical things. Other things, we are conducting a project, for example, also in Tunisia, in Gabes, for recuperating water from rain. In this scarcity of water, a water management plan for the non-conventional. The project is entitled Non-Conventional Resources of Water. For me, are the more conventional, that are the ones that came from rain. But we call the conventional the ones that came from pipelines. But no, the more conventional are the ones that fall from the sky. But we are trying to recuperate this and planning all of this and making some 3 pilots. But on all of the messages, we are doing a lot of pilots. We are doing pilots also in social aspects. For example, helping Tangier municipality to receive the sub-Saharan people that is living there, waiting maybe to cross or not to cross the Gibraltar Straits, to give them services, to give them information about how they can formalize the situation, how can they study in Tangier, for example. So also sustainability is social aspects. What I want to do is we are doing a lot of, we are doing a lot of pilots, but our pilots, we need to scale up. We need to scale up, and we need to be more quickly. We need to, and again, networks like ours is good, but also, as we said in the InterRecMed project, the InterRecMed system, the InterRecMed Academy, it's something useful also. But again, so little few people is there. So many little mayors are aware, because there is a lot of funding, has been said. There is a lot of funds, but I finalize. A lot of municipalities, they don't know that there is these funds for something that they want to do. They don't know it. And the ones that they know, they don't know how to prepare projects to achieve to that money to do projects. So again, networks like ours, like us, we do that, but we need scaling up. We need to do more.
Okay, with these words of scaling up, perhaps what we need to ask people for is to help you to scale up all these outstanding initiatives, which seem to be very, very valid to advance decarbonization, to advance greener economies from the local level, but which definitely need to be probably expanded across the region. Before we open up for comments or questions that you might have, I would like to briefly give the floor to the one supposed to be our third speaker who got lost who got lost in the COP27. But it's an honor for us to host you, who's Dr. Emad Adli, who is the General Coordinator of the Arab Network for Environment and Development. So if you want to take the floor for perhaps 3-4 minutes, because the UFM has a very tight schedule in the Med Pavilion, so we will have to finish on time. Thank you.
First of all, apologies. Okay. First of all, I would like to put a lot of apologies for this. It was not I was lost. It was just a mistake on the calendar. I thought I came early, 20 minutes early, and then I discovered I'm 1 hour late. Anyway. What I was going to say is maybe about the second part of my intervention about the water and water and environment support mechanisms that we have managed to have as a case study. We have been, as RAED and also with many other partners, led by one of the consulting firms in Greece, LDK. We are investing in this transition and helping the countries by having this project, the West project, and the southern countries. One of the things that we are very proud of is that the program has no agenda. The agenda actually comes from the countries themselves. The countries, they put what they need to do this transition and what the capacity, because our project is mainly to develop the capacities of the different agencies, government. We cover government, local authorities, civil society organizations, and even at some point private sector. So I would put emphasis on 2 things. Of course, on the waste management, we have a lot of things that we have done in issues about plastics, and I think we have enough knowledge now in the region that could help the transition towards a greener economy that is not based on plastic. That's number one. This other thing is also the model that we are being here in Egypt, the EPRR, the extended producer responsibility issue. We are trying to build the capacity of the Egyptian authorities, especially the Ministry of Environment, on doing something that could help them in managing this kind, or at least putting this as a topic that everyone has to understand what's the responsibility of the producers and their extended responsibility when it comes to the waste management. Because you are here in Sharm el-Sheikh, maybe you can see a very beautiful and clean city, but if you go to the rest of the country, exactly like you have in Tunisia and so on. So these are 2 examples that I wanted to highlight here. I don't know how much time more, but I think it's almost done here. But the point that we have managed to do in this West project, that we build the capacities of not only as I said, the different stakeholders, but also we build this kind of linkages, because you cannot make this transition. And this is one of the things that I was going to say in the first part, the structures impediments that you are facing, because we are still working in separate islands, and we are not helping to work together. This is what we are trying to do, is to bring the different actors together, because there is no one solution, or there is no one agency that can take the responsibility of the solution. And this is an example that we helped very much to bring, especially when I talked about the plastics, how we can get the involvement of the different stakeholders in dealing with the issue, because this is where you don't need all this funding. You need only the funds that can create this kind of mechanism and help the resource to be mobilized from the different actors. So this is one of the things that I would like to see in the Mediterranean more, and maybe having the COP and having the first time in the COP live to have a Med Pavilion. This is something good, and we will have to continue. But the Mediterranean is a model that has the north and south at the same time, and it's the very hot area. And we need to give good examples of what we have already established. And I think we have good examples that could even taken by other regions in Africa and outside Africa as well. So I was trying to be at least, saying something and also brief. But thank you very much for accepting my apology, if you have accepted them. And then next time, I hope I will be on time, even before time. Thank you very much.
Of course, Mr. Atlee, you are more than excused. You can of course stay. And I don't know if there is any question, comment, statement, perhaps. So please, I think you will have to use a micro because we only have room for one comment. So
Thank you.
please
No,
feel free.
it's just a question because yesterday in another session it was highlighted that maybe one of the most promising solutions to decarbonize quite quickly was the role of city to put in place public transportation, biking lanes and so on, and that quickly make the car useless or a worse alternative. So I would just like to ask, for the Mediterranean regions, how do you see these changes happening, planned, and if it's and maybe what are the resistance towards these shifts? Thank you.
Will you take that question, Giuseppe? No, please go ahead.
If I understood well, how do I see what is happening regarding mobility? Where? We have a general tendency or a general trend to improve public transportation and go beyond that. I think we have a project, for example, that is in Sfax in Tunisia that is trying to prioritize the modes from pedestrian, bicycle, public transportation and car. There are many cities, but it is a great divergency among cities. There is a tendency to work towards that, but let's be honest and critical. That what we are trying to avoid is what happens here. That we have a lot of buses coming here, but jam, a lot of cars. We're trying to help municipalities to plan differently, to plan cities that can be walked rather than have to be moved by engine combustion. So there is a general trend to public transportation and to do more public spaces to bicycle and to pedestrians, but there are also some tendencies, and we are witnessing here and in other places, cities thought for cars. So we have a lot of work to do in front of us, a lot of them.
Well, thank you so much, Ambassador. Thank you, Giuseppe. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Atlee. And thank you all for being here. As you could see, we have plenty of solutions, be it from the academia, be it from the municipalities, the local level, be it from the civil society. There are plenty of solutions. We just have to believe that the solutions are possible. We just have to, in some cases, we have to scale them up. In some others, we have to enhance, increase the investments, the green, the climate finance, but we need to act. And that's my last and final message for this event. Thank you so much, Union for the Mediterranean, alongside the other institutions that have made this Mediterranean Pavilion possible. And we hope to see you next time that the COP is being held in the Mediterranean region. Thank you.
Thank you very much.